The valley was dying. Not from artillery, not from airstrikes. Just silence, the kind that comes before men realize they've already lost. Captain Jacob Reeves pressed his back against the limestone outcrop and counted rounds. 17 magazines between 8 soldiers. No air support. No extraction until dawn, which was 4 hours away and might as well have been 4 years. The enemy held the high ground on 3 sides. Textbook encirclement. Someone on their side knew doctrine. "They're waiting," whispered Sergeant Torres, her rifle trained on the western ridge. "Why aren't they pushing?" Reeves didn't answer. He was watching the thermal readout on his scope, tracking heat signatures that moved with too much confidence. 50+ hostiles, maybe more in the caves. Then the radio crackled. Not their frequency. Enemy comms, poorly encrypted, bleeding through on the adjacent channel. A voice, male, speaking in accented English. "The American unit is trapped, all exits covered, but wait for confirmation before advancing." Another voice. Confirmation of what? A pause. Then, "They say the ghost may be with them." Torres looked at Reeves. He saw his own confusion mirrored in her face. The ghost. That was a name from 3 years ago. A myth that circulated in forward operating bases and intelligence briefings. A sniper who dismantled an entire insurgent network in 72 hours without ever being seen. No confirmed kills because there were never witnesses. Just aftermath. But the ghost was dead. The file was closed. Black ink on a classified document somewhere in Virginia. "Sir," Torres whispered. "That's impossible." Reeves agreed. But he'd also learned that impossible just meant you hadn't collected enough data yet. Movement on the northern slope. A single figure, low crawling through the scree. Not one of his people. He checked the roster mentally. All 8 soldiers accounted for in the depression behind him. 9 people in the valley. That meant, "We have a visitor," Torres breathed. The figure moved without sound. No equipment rattle, no displaced stones, just fluid motion through terrain that should have been impassable in darkness. Reeves brought his rifle up, tracking, then stopped. The figure settled into a position behind a boulder outcrop 200 meters upslope. A firing position. Oriented not toward Reeves's people, but toward the enemy ridge. Through his scope, he caught a glimpse. Smaller frame, compact build. The posture was wrong for a standard military sniper. Too relaxed. The rifle, custom, not military issue, rested in the shooter's arms like it weighed nothing. "Who the hell is that?" Torres asked. Before Reeves could answer, one of his soldiers, Private Chen, barely 22, raised his hand. "Captain, I'm picking up a targeting laser. Friendly signature." "From where?" Chen pointed northeast. The unknown sniper's position. The laser wasn't painting their position. It was mapping the enemy ridge. Calculating angles, distances, wind patterns. Professional work. Then it disappeared. "They're marking targets," Torres said. "But for who? We don't have fire support." Reeves watched the figure through his scope. The shooter adjusted their position with minimal movement. One hand came up, measuring wind drift against the thermal currents rising from the valley floor. That gesture. Reeves had seen it before, in after-action footage. Old surveillance video from a classified operation. The way the ghost had measured atmospheric conditions before a shot that traveled 1,847 meters through mountain wind. But this person was too young. Too small. "Impossible," he whispered. On the enemy frequency, the voices grew agitated. "Movement detected. Northwest ridge. Single target. Engage? Negative. Wait for visual confirmation. If it's the ghost, do not fire without authorization." They were afraid. These were hardened fighters who'd held territory against airstrikes and armor columns. But one name made them hesitate. Reeves keyed his own radio, trying the standard tactical frequencies. "Unknown friendly, this is Saber 6. Identify yourself." Nothing. He tried again. "Shooter on the northern slope, acknowledge." Silence. The figure never moved, never reached for a radio, just maintained position, rifle trained on something Reeves couldn't see. Torres crawled up beside him. "If that's the ghost?" "It's not." Reeves cut her off. "The ghost is Kia." "Confirmed." "Then who?" The radio crackled again. Enemy frequency. A new voice, older. Carrying authority. All units, be advised. Intelligence reports the ghost had an apprentice. Origin unknown. Training methods unknown. Threat level, equivalent or higher. Equivalent or higher. Reeves felt his mouth go dry. They trained someone, Torres said quietly. Before they died, they trained someone. It made terrible sense. The ghost had operated alone for years, accomplishing missions that required entire platoons. If they'd known their time was limited, if they'd seen the end coming, why wouldn't they pass on what they knew? Movement, Chen called out. Enemy advance on the western slope, 20 plus. Reeves swung his rifle around. Heat signatures descending in a staggered line, using proper bounding overwatch. These weren't amateurs. They're testing, Torres said, seeing if she'll engage. Torres had already made the assumption. Reeves didn't correct it. The enemy advanced another 30 meters. 40. Within effective range now. The unknown shooter didn't fire. Why isn't she taking the shot? Chen asked. Reeves understood. Because it's not time yet. She's waiting for something. For what? He didn't know. But he remembered the ghost's operational pattern. Never fire until the shot accomplished maximum effect. Never waste ammunition on anything less than decisive action. The enemy kept advancing. 50 meters. Close enough that Reeves could engage with his own rifle now. His finger moved to the trigger guard. Torres caught his wrist. Don't. If we fire, we give away our exact position. She's protecting our location. The realization hit him. The unknown shooter had deliberately positioned herself to draw attention away from Reeves's unit. She was the bait. The distraction. But for what kind of trap? On the ridge above, the enemy commander, identifiable by his different thermal signature, body armor with more plates, stopped his advance. He raised one hand. His unit froze. Through the scope, Reeves saw the man turn slowly, scanning the northern slope, looking for the ghost. The wind changed direction. Reeves felt it on his face. A shift from northeast to southwest. A 5-degree temperature drop. Atmospheric pressure falling. The unknown shooter adjusted her aim. A millimeter to the left, then half a millimeter up, compensating for the wind change. She's going to fire, Torres whispered. Negative, Reeves said. Not yet. She's still waiting. For what? Then he heard it. A second enemy unit, moving through the eastern canyon. Reinforcements. The radio chatter increased, coordinating a pincer movement. The trap wasn't for Reeves's unit. It was for the enemy reinforcements. The unknown shooter had waited for both enemy forces to commit, to move into positions where they couldn't support each other. Classic economy of force. Let the enemy create their own vulnerability. Reeves smiled despite himself. She's her student, he said quietly. No question. The enemy commander on the western ridge finally spotted the shooter's position. He raised his rifle, finger tightening, and hesitated. Through the scope, Reeves saw the man's lips move. Reading them was impossible at this distance, but he could guess the words. You're her? The question hung in the air. The wind went still, and in that breath before action, every person in the valley, friend and enemy alike, understood they were witnessing something that shouldn't exist. A ghost that had learned to multiply. The file was labeled Operation Nightfall. Eyes only. 3 years earlier, in a gray room at Fort Bragg, Colonel Sarah Hendricks had opened that file for the first time. The pages inside contained more questions than answers. Subject name, redacted. Call sign, ghost. Service record, classified. Confirmed eliminations, 147. Methods, unknown. Current status, missing, presumed deceased. Hendricks had been assigned to investigate the ghost's disappearance. Not because the brass cared about one missing operator, people vanished in the field all the time, but because the ghost had carried operational knowledge that couldn't be allowed to fall into enemy hands. The last confirmed sighting, a surveillance photograph from a border checkpoint, dated 3 years and 4 months ago. The image showed a woman in civilian clothes, average height, unremarkable features. The kind of face that disappeared in crowds. She'd been traveling alone, or so the checkpoint officer had reported. Hendricks had pulled every database, every satellite pass, every signal intercept from that region. The ghost had simply ceased to exist after crossing that checkpoint. No financial transactions, no border crossings, no digital footprint, Dead, the official report concluded, probably killed in whatever unauthorized operation she'd been running. Case closed. Except Hendricks had found one anomaly, a single piece of evidence that didn't fit, a birth certificate, filed 17 years earlier in a county hospital 3 states away. Mother's name redacted, father listed as unknown. Child's name, also redacted, but the date was there. The time, the attending physician. Hendricks had tracked down that physician, now retired, living in a cabin near the Canadian border. I remember her, the old man had said, staring into his coffee. She came in alone, paid cash, refused pain medication, wanted no one else in the delivery room. Did she say anything? Hendricks had asked. Just one thing. After the baby was born, she held it for maybe 30 seconds. Then she looked at me and said, "If anyone asks, this never happened." And you agreed? The physician had shrugged. She had a look in her eyes, like she was protecting something more important than herself. Hendricks had pressed him. Did you see the baby? Was it healthy? Healthy? That child barely cried, just watched everything with these dark eyes, like it was already learning. Back in the gray room, Hendricks had stared at that birth certificate for hours. The ghost had a child. Somewhere in the world, there was a 17-year-old with the ghost's genetics, possibly with the ghost's training. She'd filed a supplementary report, flagging the potential security risk. The response from higher up had been swift and unambiguous. Drop the investigation. The ghost is dead. The child, if it exists, is a civilian. No further action required. But Hendricks hadn't been able to let it go. She'd spent her own time, her own resources, chasing shadows, interviewing people who'd served with the ghost, pulling old mission reports. A pattern had emerged. The ghost had never worked with a team, never taken backup. But in the final 2 years before vanishing, something had changed. The missions had gotten shorter. The time between deployments had lengthened, as if the ghost had been spending time somewhere else, teaching someone. One intelligence analyst, a nervous man named Peterson, had told Hendricks something useful over drinks. The ghost had a storage unit, paid 10 years in advance, cash, location classified, but I heard it was somewhere in the Appalachians. What was in it? No idea. But the rental agreement specified climate control and weapons storage, a classroom, an armory, a place to pass on knowledge. Hendricks had never found that storage unit. She'd been reassigned before she could follow the lead, but she'd kept the file on her personal drive, updating it whenever new information surfaced. Like 6 months ago, when a weapons dealer in Eastern Europe reported selling a custom rifle specifications matching the ghost's preferred platform to a young woman with an American accent who paid in gold and never spoke above a whisper. Or 3 months ago, when an insurgent cell in the Highlands had been eliminated overnight. 17 targets, 17 headshots, no survivors. Local authorities blamed rival factions, but Hendricks knew the pattern. One shooter, one night, no witnesses. The ghost's methodology. But the ghost was dead. So who? Her phone buzzed. A priority message from Central Command. Flash traffic. Sabre 6 unit pinned down. Unidentified friendly providing support. Request immediate background check. Description attached. Hendricks opened the attachment. The description was sparse. Female, estimated age, late teens to early 20s, expert-level marksmanship, operates alone, refuses radio contact. Her coffee went cold in her hand. She opened her classified drive and pulled up the birth certificate. 17 years old. Give or take a few months. Oh God, she whispered. She grabbed her phone, dialing the operations desk. This is Colonel Hendricks. I need satellite coverage on the Sabre 6 engagement zone. Full spectrum, historical and real time. Ma'am, that area is already covered. Not by standard reconnaissance. I need thermal tracking, going back 72 hours. I'm looking for a single individual, operating independently, approaching from... She stopped. She didn't know where the ghost's daughter would approach from. The ghost had taught her better than to leave trails. Ma'am? Hendricks closed her eyes. Never mind, just keep the feeds running, and flag any individual who exhibits counter-surveillance behavior. She hung up and pulled the old surveillance photo from 3 years ago. The ghost at the checkpoint, face turned slightly away from the camera. Traveling alone. But the checkpoint officer's report had included one detail Hendricks had almost overlooked. Subject appeared fatigued. Posture suggested recent physical strain. Recent physical strain. Or someone carrying extra weight. Hendrik zoomed in on the photograph, enhancing the image. The ghost's jacket oversized, loose around the torso, hiding something. Or someone. A child, young enough to carry, old enough to watch, to learn. Hendrik sat back in her chair. The ghost hadn't vanished to die. She'd vanished to teach. And now, after 3 years of silence, the student had appeared. On a battlefield. Alone. Against an enemy that feared the name of her teacher. Hendrix reached for her phone again, then stopped. What could she say? That the ghost's legacy had manifested? That a teenager trained by America's most lethal operator was now in the field without authorization, without oversight, without backup? The brass would panic. They'd send extraction teams, retrieval units, and the ghost's daughter would disappear, just like her mother. Hendrix closed the file and encrypted it again. Some ghosts, she decided, were better left to haunt in peace. Her first memory was wind. Not the sound, she'd been too young to understand sound. But the feeling, invisible force against her skin, moving through the world with direction and purpose. Her mother had held her on a hillside, letting the wind push against them both, teaching without words. She didn't remember her mother's face. Only hands calloused, precise, never wasted motion. The hands had shown her how to read landscapes, how to measure distance with thumb and forefinger, how to control breathing so completely that even in sleep she barely moved. No toys, only tools. By age 5, she could strip and reassemble a rifle in darkness, not because her mother made her, but because that's what her mother did, and children learn by imitation. By age 7, she could calculate bullet trajectory using nothing but observation, wind, humidity, barometric pressure. Her mother never explained the physics. Just pointed at leaves moving in the breeze, then pointed at a target, then let her figure out the relationship. School didn't exist, neither did friends, or birthday parties, or any normal childhood ritual. Just hillsides, forests, valleys where sound traveled differently depending on temperature. Her mother spoke rarely. Sometimes days would pass in complete silence, but the lessons never stopped. A gesture. Watch this bird. See how it compensates for crosswind? Another gesture. Your breathing is affecting your aim. Find the space between heartbeats. When her mother did speak, the words were tactical. One bullet must end the war, not start it. That was the core doctrine. The only rule that mattered. Violence was never a solution. It was a scalpel, used precisely, minimally, to cut away the disease before it spread. Amateurs shoot to kill, her mother had said once, breaking 3 days of silence. We shoot to resolve. She was 12 when she made her first real shot, not at a target, but at a situation. They'd been hiking through woods when they heard shouting, men's voices, angry. Through the trees, they saw a woman being dragged toward a truck. 2 men, armed with pistols but no training. Cruel, not professional. Her mother had stopped, observing, then handed over the rifle without a word. She'd taken position behind a fallen log, measured the distance, 340 meters, wind from the northeast, steady, late afternoon sun creating contrast. She didn't aim for the men. She put a round through the truck's engine block. The sudden crack, the spray of metal fragments, the immediate mechanical death. The men had frozen. Long enough for the woman to run, long enough for her and her mother to disappear before anyone could locate the shot. Walking away, her mother had spoken, "You solved a problem without creating more problems." That's maturity. At 14, she'd watched her mother from a ridge, while her mother eliminated a cell of traffickers. 8 targets across a compound, 8 shots in 90 seconds. But her mother had waited 3 hours for those 90 seconds. Waited until every target was in a position where their elimination would prevent, not provoke, retaliation. Patience is the ammunition you never waste, her mother had told her afterward. They lived nowhere and everywhere. A cabin here for 6 months, a trailer there for a season, always moving, always watching for patterns in their own behavior that might make them predictable. Her mother taught her that routine was death, that comfort was vulnerability. People who sleep in the same place become targets, her mother said. We're not targets, we're solutions to problems we haven't encountered yet. At 16, she woke one morning and her mother was gone. No note, no explanation, just absence. On the table, a rifle case, custom built. Inside, a weapon configured exactly to her measurements, her grip, her eye relief. Beside it, a single piece of paper with GPS coordinates and a date 6 months in the future. Nothing else. She'd waited at those coordinates on that date. A clearing in the mountains, wind from the west. Her mother never came. But a message had been left carved into a tree, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Continue the work. That was all. No, I love you, no goodbye, just a mission briefing. She'd understood immediately. Her mother wasn't coming back. Whether dead or hiding, it didn't matter. The training was complete. The transfer of knowledge was done. Now she had a choice: use what she'd learned or let it disappear with her mother. She'd made her decision that day on the hillside. The wind had been blowing from the northeast, steady and cold, same wind as her first memory. She'd assembled the rifle, chambered a round, and put a practice shot into a target 800 meters downslope. Dead center. Her mother's voice in her head: one bullet must end the war, not start it. She'd packed the rifle, erased her presence from the clearing, and walked down the mountain, looking for wars that needed ending. Captain Reeves knew they were in a kill box. The valley had seemed like a tactical advantage 2 hours ago. Cover from aerial observation, multiple egress routes, water source nearby, standard operating procedure for a rest position. But kill boxes didn't announce themselves. They waited until you were comfortable. Now the enemy held every approach. West Ridge, East Canyon, southern slopes all occupied. His unit sat in the depression at the valley floor like fish in a barrel. "Sir," Private Chen whispered, "I'm not picking up any air support signals." Reeves checked his own tactical display. Nothing. The close air support that was supposed to be on standby had either been diverted, or more likely, this engagement was happening off the books. No one was coming. Torres crawled up beside him, radio in hand. Sabre 5 and Sabre 7 both report they're pinned down in their sectors. Whatever this is, it's coordinated. Coordinated meant planning. Planning meant intelligence. Someone had known where American units would be positioned tonight. "How long until dawn?" Reeves asked. 3 hours, 40 minutes. An eternity. The enemy radio chatter had gone quiet 15 minutes ago. That bothered Reeves more than the talking. Silence meant preparation. Chen pointed toward the western ridge. Movement. They're repositioning. Through his scope, Reeves watched enemy forces shifting into a new formation. Not an assault pattern, something more careful, bounding overwatch, interlocking fields of fire. They were setting up for something. "Mortars," Torres said quietly, recognizing the pattern. "They're spacing for indirect fire teams." If mortars started falling in the valley, there was no cover. The depression that protected them from direct fire would become a grave. "How long do we have?" Reeves asked. 5 minutes to set up, maybe less if they're good. Reeves did the math. 8 soldiers, 17 magazines, no support, against 50+ hostiles with high ground and heavy weapons. The equation didn't balance. He keyed his radio to the command frequency, knowing it was probably futile. "Any unit, this is Sabre 6. We are in a pre-planned ambush. Enemy force superior numbers and positioning. Request immediate fire support, any available asset." Static. He tried again, still nothing. "We're jammed," Chen said, checking his equipment. "Broad spectrum. They've got an electromagnetic blanket over the whole valley." Professional work. This wasn't opportunistic enemy contact. This was a designed trap. Torres met Reeves's eyes. The question was there, unspoken. What are the orders? He had 3 options: defend in place and wait for the mortars, attempt a breakout through superior enemy forces, or surrender. The first meant death. The second probably meant death. The third meant capture, which for special operations personnel often meant worse than death. Before he could decide, the enemy radio crackled back to life. A new voice, speaking clear English with a Moscow accent. "American soldiers in the valley. You have one opportunity to surrender. You are outnumbered. You have no support. Place your weapons on the ground and stand with your hands visible. You will be treated according to military convention." Torres raised an eyebrow. They've never offered surrender before. She was right. The forces they'd been fighting for the past 6 months didn't take prisoners, they took trophies. It's a trap within the trap, Reeves said. They want us to reveal our exact position. Or, Chen offered quietly, they're legitimately afraid of something. The ghost. The unknown shooter on the northern ridge hadn't moved since taking position, still locked in place, rifle trained on something in the darkness. The enemy voice came again. You have 3 minutes to comply. After that, we will begin firing. You cannot escape. You cannot win. Accept the logic of your situation. Torres checked her magazine. 15 rounds left. What's the play, Captain? Reeves looked at his soldiers, 8 people who trusted him to make the right call. He thought about the unknown shooter. Why was she here? What was her objective? If she'd wanted to simply escape, she could have, but she deliberately positioned herself to draw enemy attention. She was protecting his unit's location while simultaneously presenting herself as a target. Bait. But bait for what? Then he remembered his tactical training. Years ago. An instructor, former Marine sniper, had told them about economy of force. The best shot isn't always the first shot. Sometimes you let the enemy commit to bad positions before you act. The unknown shooter was waiting. Not for permission, not for support. She was waiting for the enemy to commit. Sir? Torres prompted. Reeves made his decision. We hold position, weapons ready, but no one fires unless I give the word. They're going to start dropping mortars. I know. And we're just going to wait? We're going to trust, Reeves said, looking toward the northern ridge, that someone smarter than us has a plan. Torres followed his gaze. That's a lot of faith to put in a stranger. It's not a stranger, Reeves said quietly. It's a legacy. On the western ridge, he could see through his scope as the enemy mortar team finished setting up. 2 tubes, angled for the valley floor. The crew worked with efficiency. 1 minute until they were ready to fire. 45 seconds. 30. Chen's hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the forced stillness, the deliberate inaction. 15 seconds. The mortar crew loaded their first rounds. Captain, Torres whispered urgently. Hold, Reeves said. 10 seconds. 5. The mortar team raised their hands, ready to drop the rounds. And that's when Reeves understood. The enemy had committed everything. Assault teams in fixed positions, mortar crews exposed on the ridge, command elements coordinating from high ground. They'd created their own vulnerability. The entire enemy force was now oriented on the valley floor. Every soldier focused downward. No one was watching their own flanks. On the northern ridge, the unknown shooter adjusted her aim 1 final degree. The enemy commander spoke into his radio. Fire. The mortar crew dropped their first rounds. And in the half second before those rounds could leave the tubes, a single rifle shot cracked through the darkness. The enemy commander's name was Viktor Sokolov. He'd been fighting in these mountains for 7 years. He'd survived drone strikes, artillery barrages, close quarters combat in tunnels where you killed the man next to you with a knife because guns were too slow. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in patterns. And for 3 years, one pattern had haunted his nightmares. An American sniper who appeared without warning and disappeared without trace. Who killed commanders, supply officers, communication specialists, never frontline troops, always infrastructure. 72 hours after the ghost appeared, entire operational networks would collapse. Then the ghost had vanished. Viktor had celebrated with vodka and relief. Now, standing on the western ridge with thermal goggles pressed to his face, he scanned the valley below and felt that old fear returning. Movement on the northern slope, his second-in-command reported. Single target. Viktor swung his goggles north. There, a heat signature, small, compact, human. In a sniper position, his mouth went dry. Range? 1,200 meters to our position, 800 to the American unit. Viktor zoomed in. The figure's posture, the way the rifle rested, he'd seen that stance before. In surveillance footage, in the nightmares. Is it his second-in-command couldn't finish the question? Viktor didn't answer. He was too busy calculating. The ghost had been approximately 5'8", 70 kilos. This shooter looked smaller, younger. Maybe the intelligence was wrong. Maybe the ghost hadn't died. Or maybe they had an apprentice, Viktor whispered. His radio operator looked up. Sir? American intelligence reported the ghost had a student. We dismissed it as disinformation. If they trained someone, then we're facing the same threat. Victor felt sweat despite the cold. Perhaps worse, the student learns from the teacher's mistakes. He raised his radio. All units, be advised. Unidentified sniper on northern slope. Do not, I repeat, do not engage without my authorization. Pattern matches ghost operational profile. Silence on the radio. His men knew what that meant. Victor made a decision. Second team, maneuver to flank the sniper's position. Use the eastern approach, stay below the ridgeline. I want visual confirmation before we commit. Sir, the American unit is contained. They're not our primary concern anymore. Because if the ghost student was here, everything changed. You didn't fight the ghost directly. You forced them to reveal themselves, then brought overwhelming force. Through his goggles, he watched the unknown shooter adjust position. Minimal movement, professional, too professional. His flanking team began their approach. 12 men moving through the rocks with tactical precision. They'd loop around, come up behind the sniper, confirm identity. The shooter's head turned slightly. As if listening, Victor's stomach tightened. Flanking team, report position. 300 meters from target. No sign of awareness. But Victor had seen that head movement. The shooter knew. Abort approach, he said into the radio. Return to primary positions. Sir, we almost have. That's an order. Fall back now. Too late. The unknown shooter made a gesture, one hand, palm up, measuring something invisible. Wind, Victor realized. She was measuring wind. Then she rotated her rifle 45 degrees and fired. Not at Victor's position. Not at the flanking team yet. At the mortar tubes. The round struck the base of the first tube, ricocheted through the support strut, and sparked against the second round that was halfway loaded. The mortar shell detonated. Victor hit the ground as fire and shrapnel tore through his mortar position. 2 men dead instantly, 3 more wounded. The tubes twisted and useless. Return fire, someone screamed. Belay that, Victor countermanded. Do not fire, she's baiting you. But discipline broke. Fear drove his men to action. 15 rifles opened up on the northern slope. Rounds sparked off rocks, shredded vegetation. The unknown shooter had already moved. Victor saw the heat signature shift positions impossibly fast, impossibly smooth, to a new location 30 meters away. And from that position, one more shot. This one took his radio operator through the chest. The man dropped without sound. Cease fire, Victor shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. He grabbed his backup radio, switching frequencies. All units, tactical withdrawal, disengage and fall back to secondary positions. Sir, we have them pinned. That's what she wants. Every second we stay exposed, she picks our infrastructure apart. Move now. Through the thermal scope, he saw his flanking team trying to retreat. The unknown shooter tracked them, fired once. The team leader dropped. Not dead, Victor could see him moving, clutching his leg, deliberately wounded, because now his team had to stop and render aid. They were fixed in place. Leave him, Victor ordered. Keep moving. But soldiers don't abandon wounded. The team stopped, providing cover while 2 men grabbed their leader. The unknown shooter didn't fire again. She didn't need to. She'd accomplished her objective, slowing the flanking maneuver, forcing his units into defensive posture. Victor finally understood. She wasn't trying to kill maximum enemy. She was disrupting his operational tempo, making him reactive instead of proactive. Classic ghost doctrine. He raised his own rifle, a custom piece that had cost him 3 months' salary, mounted his own thermal scope, and began scanning for the shooter. Their movement behind a boulder cluster. He tracked the heat signature, leading it slightly, finger on trigger. The signature was too large. Not a person. A heat pack, probably military issue, placed deliberately to draw fire. Decoy, Victor breathed. Which meant the real shooter was. His radio crackled. Sir, we've lost contact with the eastern observation post. Victor felt ice in his veins. What do you mean, lost contact? They're not responding. Last transmission was 90 seconds ago. The eastern observation post had been his early warning system. 3 men with communication equipment, monitoring the approaches. If they were silent, it meant, "She's been moving," Victor said aloud. "This whole time, she's been repositioning. We're not fighting one sniper, we're fighting a ghost who's everywhere at once." He swung his rifle back toward the northern slope, scanning desperately. And that's when he saw her. Not through the scope. With his naked eyes. A figure stood on the ridgeline, backlit by the rising moon. Small frame, rifle held with casual confidence. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was making herself visible. Victor raised his rifle, settling the crosshairs on center mass. An easy shot, maybe 400 meters in clear air. His finger touched the trigger. Then he saw her posture, the way she held the rifle. The angle of her stance and recognition flooded through him like cold water. He'd seen that exact stance in surveillance footage. The ghost, moments before eliminating a target from 1,847 meters. Victor's lips moved involuntarily. "You're her?" The question felt absurd even as he asked it. This person was too young, too small, but the stance didn't lie. Through his scope, magnified 12 times, he could see her face now. Young, maybe 20, dark eyes that showed no emotion. She adjusted her aim. 1 degree left, pointing directly at him. Victor had been in enough firefights to know when death was looking back. This was that moment. He could fire first. His finger was on the trigger. He could. She fired. The world went white. Distance, 1,247 meters. Wind, northeast, 4.3 meters per second, gusting to 6.1. Temperature, 8 degrees Celsius at firing position, estimated 6 degrees at target elevation. Barometric pressure, falling, storm front moving in from the west. She'd calculated all of this in the 3 seconds between identifying the enemy commander and deciding to fire. The rifle was already configured, custom barrel, hand-loaded ammunition, scope calibrated to her specific vision. Her mother had built this weapon for one purpose: precision at extreme range under imperfect conditions. She settled into the firing position. Not tense tension created micro-movements. Instead, she found the space her mother had taught her. The place between heartbeats where the body became perfectly still. The enemy commander was raising his own rifle. Through her scope, she could see his finger touching the trigger. He would fire in approximately 1.2 seconds. Her bullet would reach him in 1.7 seconds. Mathematics said she would lose. But mathematics didn't account for psychology. She watched his face through the scope, reading the micro-expressions. Fear, recognition, hesitation. He'd identified her stance, understood what it meant. That moment of understanding would cost him 0.3 seconds of reaction time. Now the equation balanced. She adjusted her breathing. 3 heartbeats. On the 4th, between systole and diastole, she would fire. The rifle rested in her hands like an extension of her arms. No fighting the weapon, no forcing the shot. Wind shifted slightly. She compensated 0.5 millimeter right. The adjustment was instinctive, trained through 10,000 practice shots. 3. She found the gap between heartbeats. Fired. The rifle's recoil was absorbed through her whole body, dissipating the energy so that the scope stayed on target. Through the magnification, she watched the bullets trace invisible to the naked eye, but she'd learned to track the distortion in the air, the way moisture particles scattered. At 400 meters, the round passed through a thermal layer. The air's differential density bent the trajectory 2 millimeters left. She'd calculated for this. At 800 meters, the crosswind pushed harder. The bullet drifted 4 centimeters right, still within acceptable parameters. At 1,100 meters, gravity and air resistance had slowed the round from 853 meters per second to 612. The terminal ballistics were degrading, but the bullet remained stable. At 1,247 meters, the round arrived. She'd aimed not for the commander's center mass body armor would have defeated the shot, but for the radio on his shoulder. The bullet struck the radio's battery pack at an angle. Lithium cells punctured at high velocity have a specific response: rapid thermal expansion. The battery didn't explode. Hollywood got that wrong, but it did vent superheated gas and chemical compounds directly into the commander's face. Through her scope, she watched him drop his rifle and stumble backward, hands clutching his eyes. Not dead, temporarily blinded, permanently removed from command. The psychological impact on his unit would be significant. She worked the bolt, chambering a new round. Swept the scope right, tracking for secondary targets. The enemy mortar position already damaged by her first shot was in chaos. The surviving crew members were dragging wounded away from the twisted tubes. She didn't fire. They were no longer a threat. Her scope moved to the eastern canyon, where the flanking team had frozen in place. The wounded leader was being carried now, the team moving in tactical retreat. Again, she held fire. A retreating enemy was more valuable than a dead one. Retreat spread fear faster than casualties. Her primary objective wasn't kill count. It was disruption. Every enemy unit that stopped advancing to reorganize. Every commander who chose caution over aggression. Every soldier who hesitated because they didn't know where the next shot would come from. This was her mother's doctrine. Economy of force. Accomplish maximum strategic effect with minimum expenditure of resources. 2 shots fired. 1 mortar position eliminated. 1 command structure decapitated. 1 flanking maneuver halted. And below, in the valley, Captain Reeves's unit remained intact. She scanned the battlefield through her scope, looking for the next piece to remove. The enemy had committed approximately 60 personnel. After her 2 shots, they'd shifted to defensive posture. Squad leaders shouting orders, men scrambling for harder cover. Good. Fear made people reactive. Reactive people made mistakes. She watched an enemy squad leader, visible by his different equipment loadout, trying to organize his men near the western ridge. He was gesturing, pointing, attempting to coordinate a new firing position. Leadership in chaos, valuable. She calculated the shot, 890 meters, downslope, wind from her right. Easier than the first shot. But she didn't fire. Instead, she put a round into the rock face, 3 meters to the squad leader's left. The bullet's impact threw stone chips and dust. The squad leader dove for cover, abandoning his organization efforts. His men scattered. She'd used 1 bullet to neutralize an entire squad. No casualties, maximum disruption. Her radio set to monitor enemy frequencies crackled with panic. Sniper has western approach zeroed. Pull back to the caves. Eastern team, report status. We're withdrawing. We have wounded. Where is the shooter? Someone give me a location. North Ridge, but she keeps moving. Then suppress the entire ridgeline. She smiled slightly. Suppressing an entire ridgeline with scattered fire. That would waste their ammunition and accomplish nothing. But it would keep them busy. She low-crawled 15 meters to a new position, taking her time. No rush. The enemy was too disorganized to coordinate an effective response. From her new location, she could see the American unit in the valley. Captain Reeves was watching through his own scope, trying to track her movements. Smart officer. Observing rather than interfering. She raised 1 hand visible in the moonlight and made a simple gesture. Stay down. Reeves would understand. Through her scope, she saw him nod. Good. She returned her attention to the enemy. They were attempting to reorganize near the cave entrances, hard cover, good defensive positions. But caves had a weakness, limited exits. She didn't need to shoot anyone else. She just needed to keep them pinned inside until dawn. She settled into overwatch position and waited. Patience, her mother had taught, was ammunition you never wasted. Captain Reeves watched through his scope as the enemy forces retreated into the caves. 30 minutes ago, they'd been preparing to massacre his unit. Now they were hiding. 2 shots. That's all it had taken. Sir, Torres whispered. What the hell just happened? Reeves lowered his scope. Surgical disruption. She didn't fight them. She made them fight themselves. 2 shots, Chen said, his voice awed. She fired twice and broke their entire offensive. Not broke, Reeves corrected. Redirected. They're still combat effective, but they're no longer combat confident. Torres looked toward the northern ridge. That's ghost doctrine. I read the classified briefs after the ghost disappeared. Economy of force, maximum psychological impact, minimal direct engagement. You read the classified briefs? Reeves raised an eyebrow. I had clearance. Briefly. Before they sealed everything. Torres paused. The ghost never killed unless killing was the only solution. And even then, they never killed more than necessary. Reeves thought about that. The unknown shooter had multiple opportunities to eliminate enemy combatants, but she'd chosen restraint. One commander blinded, one radio destroyed, one squad scattered. No excessive casualties. "She's following the rules," he said quietly. "What rules?" "Her mother's rules." Private Chen pointed toward the eastern canyon. "Sir, movement. Enemy pulling back completely." Through the scope, Reeves confirmed it. The flanking team was withdrawing, carrying their wounded. The main force in the caves was holding position, but no longer advancing. A tactical stalemate. Except it wasn't stalemate. The enemy was contained. Reeves's unit was safe, and dawn was coming. At first light, air support would arrive. Medical evacuation, reinforcements, all because one shooter had bought them time. "Captain," Torres said slowly, "how did she know we were here?" Good question. Reeves had been wondering the same thing. "She didn't," he concluded. "She was tracking the enemy. We were incidental. Then why protect us?" "Because we were here, and we needed protection." Reeves scanned the northern ridge again. The Ghost never worked missions for glory. They worked problems that needed solving. "I think the daughter operates the same way." Sergeant Torres was quiet for a moment. Then, "My uncle was in the 75th Rangers. He served on a joint task force that supposedly worked with the Ghost, never confirmed, all classified. But he told me once off the record that the Ghost saved his unit by doing exactly this, not shooting the enemy, just making them too afraid to advance." "What happened to the unit?" "They extracted at dawn. 0 casualties." Torres looked at Reeves. He said it felt like being protected by someone who understood war better than anyone he'd ever met. Chen spoke up. "Do we try to make contact? Signal her somehow?" Reeves considered it, then shook his head. "No, she knows we're here. If she wanted communication, she'd initiate it. So we just wait? We hold position. Stay quiet. Let her work." For the next hour, nothing happened. The enemy stayed in the caves. The unknown shooter remained on the northern ridge, invisible now, repositioned somewhere beyond thermal detection. But Reeves could feel her presence. The way a prey animal feels a predator nearby. Not threatening, but watchful. At 0400 hours, one of his soldiers, Corporal Mitchell, a sniper himself, crawled up beside Reeves. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." Mitchell kept his voice low. "I've been watching the pattern. The way she moves between positions. The shots she takes and doesn't take. That's not just training. That's genetics." Reeves frowned. "Explain." "I knew a competitive shooter once. Olympic level. His daughter, 8 years old, could outshoot most adults, not because she practiced more, because she inherited his visual processing, his hand-eye coordination." Mitchell paused. "The Ghost was the best sniper anyone had ever seen. If they had a kid and trained them." "You're saying it's biological?" "I'm saying it's both. The training built on a foundation that was already optimal." Mitchell gestured toward the northern ridge. "That's not just skill. That's legacy. Literal genetic legacy." Torres joined the conversation. The Ghost psych profile before it was redacted noted exceptional spatial reasoning and pattern recognition. Off the charts. If those traits are hereditary, then the daughter started with advantages most people never have, Reeves finished. Plus, training from the best operator the military ever produced. "She's not military though," Chen pointed out. "No rank, no unit designation. She's completely independent." "Which makes her more dangerous," Mitchell said. "No chain of command to override her judgment. No rules of engagement except her own." Reeves thought about that. A sniper with Ghost-level skills and no institutional oversight. Or, he offered, it makes her more effective. The Ghost operated best when left alone. Maybe the daughter is the same. At 0430, the enemy radio traffic picked up again. Someone, not the blinded commander, was trying to organize a pre-dawn breakout. "All teams, prepare to move on my signal. We'll use smoke for concealment and exit through the southern canyon. The sniper can't cover all approaches." Reeves smiled. They were right. One sniper couldn't cover all approaches, but she didn't need to. On the enemy frequency, the new commander gave the order, "Deploy smoke, move in 3, 2, 1, go." Smoke canisters detonated, flooding the cave entrances with gray concealment. Enemy forces burst out, moving fast toward the southern canyon. And from the northern ridge, a single shot. Not at the running soldiers, at the canyon wall, 100 meters ahead of their route. The bullet struck a specific point on the limestone face, probably scouted earlier, and triggered a rock slide. Not a massive collapse, just enough debris to block the southern canyon exit. The enemy forces stumbled to a halt, trapped between the caves and the rock slide. On the radio, abort, return to cover. They scrambled back into the caves. Torres whistled softly. She's not just shooting, she's engineering the battlefield. Like mother, like daughter, Mitchell said. Dawn arrived at 0512. With first light came the sound Reeves had been waiting for. Rotors. Apache gunships appeared over the eastern ridge, thermal targeting systems sweeping the valley. On the command frequency, finally clear of enemy jamming. Sabre 6, this is Guardian 2. We have you visual. Report status. Reeves keyed his radio. Guardian 2, Sabre 6. Enemy forces contained in cave positions on western ridge. We have had assistance from an unidentified friendly. Copy that. We're picking up a single heat signature on the northern slope. Is that your friendly? Reeves looked toward the ridge. Through his scope, he could just make out a figure standing now, no longer hiding. Affirmative. Do not engage that position. Repeat, do not engage. Friendly sniper. Understood. Stand by for extraction. The Apaches made a slow pass over the enemy positions, weapons hot but holding fire. The message was clear: surrender or die. Within 10 minutes, white flags appeared from the caves. Torres stood, weapons still ready. It's over. Reeves stood as well, scanning the northern ridge. The figure was gone. He swept the entire ridgeline with his scope. No heat signature, no movement. She'd vanished the moment the gunships arrived. Did anyone see where she went? He asked. His soldiers shook their heads. Just like the ghost. Present when needed, gone when the job was done. Chen found something on the ground 50 meters from their position. He called out, "Captain, you need to see this." Reeves walked over. On a flat rock, arranged deliberately, an empty brass casing from a 338 Lapua Magnum round, the ghost's preferred caliber. Beside it, scratched into the rock, "Continue the work." The same words the ghost had left for her daughter, now passed to anyone who would listen. Torres read the words and nodded slowly. She's not hiding her connection. She wants us to know. Not us, Reeves said. She wants the enemy to know. Let them spread the story. Let them lie awake, wondering if the ghost is back. Psychological warfare, Mitchell said. The best kind. The kind that prevents the next fight from ever happening. Reeves picked up the brass casing. Evidence. Proof. Then he dropped it back on the rock. Some stories needed to be told. Some legends needed to grow. Sergeant Torres, in your after-action report, you will document that Sabre 6 received assistance from an unknown sniper. Competent, professional, gone before positive identification could be made. Torres smiled. And the brass casing? What brass casing? They left it on the rock and moved toward the extraction point. Behind them, the sun rose over the valley. Light touched the northern ridge last, illuminating nothing but stone and wind. No evidence anyone had been there at all. Colonel Hendricks read the after-action report 3 times. Unknown sniper, competent, professional. She knew what that meant. Her phone rang. A secure line. Hendricks. Colonel, this is General Marsh. I need you to explain something to me. Hendricks sat up straighter. 2-star generals didn't call majors directly unless something was very wrong or very classified. Captain Reeves's report from the Valley engagement. He mentions an unknown friendly who provided overwatch. His description matches certain historical patterns. We'd prefer to stay historical. I'm aware, General. Are you also aware that enemy signals intelligence intercepted radio chatter about the ghost returning? That story is now circulating through every insurgent network in the region? Hendricks chose her words carefully. Sir, if I may speak freely? You may. Sometimes the best weapon isn't a person, it's an idea. If enemy forces believe the ghost is active again, they'll alter their behavior. Increased caution, decreased operational tempo, self-imposed limitations on. I understand psychological operations, Colonel. What I want to know is, do we have a ghost-level asset operating without authorization? Silence. Hendricks had prepared for this question. Sir, our last credible intelligence on the ghost indicated they died 3 years ago. However, it's possible they trained someone before their death. A successor. Possible or confirmed? Unconfirmed. The ghost's personal life was highly compartmentalized. But there are indicators. What kind of indicators? Hendricks opened her classified file. A birth certificate. Weapons purchases. Reported sightings over the past 18 months. All circumstantial. If this successor exists, why haven't we recruited them? Because, General, they don't want to be recruited. The ghost operated independently by choice. It appears their successor shares that preference. She heard papers shuffling on the other end. So we have a highly skilled sniper operating in combat zones without oversight, following doctrine from a deceased operator, and spreading fear through enemy ranks. That's an accurate summary, sir. Colonel Hendricks, tell me, is this person a threat or an asset? Hendricks had thought about this for months. Both, sir. And neither. Explain. The ghost's operational pattern showed clear rules of engagement, minimal casualties, maximum strategic effect, surgical disruption rather than mass destruction. Their successor appears to follow the same pattern. So, an asset. Unless their goals diverge from ours, then they're an uncontrolled threat with extraordinary capabilities. General Marsh was quiet for a moment. What's your recommendation? Monitor but don't engage. Let them work. If their actions align with our strategic interests, and so far they have, we benefit without assuming responsibility. If they become problematic, we have enough intelligence to locate and neutralize. Neutralize, the general repeated. You think we could? Hendricks smiled despite herself. Honestly, sir, I doubt it. The ghost evaded capture for a decade. I suspect their successor is even better at staying hidden. That's not reassuring, Colonel. No, sir. But it's honest. Another pause. Very well. Continue monitoring. Report any significant developments directly to me. And Hendricks? If you get any indication this person is planning something outside our interests, I want to know immediately. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. The line went dead. Hendricks sat back in her chair and opened the ghost's file again. She found the surveillance photo from 3 years ago. The ghost at the checkpoint, carrying hidden weight. A daughter, 17 years old now, highly trained, highly motivated. But motivated by what? That was the question, keeping Hendricks awake. The ghost had died or disappeared shortly after crossing that checkpoint. If they'd been training their daughter until the end, what final lesson had they taught? Hendricks pulled up the most recent intelligence. The Valley engagement, the surgical precision, the minimal casualties. Economy of force. Classic ghost doctrine. But there was something else in the pattern, something Hendricks hadn't seen in the ghost's original operations. Restraint. The ghost had been efficient, but ruthless when necessary. The daughter seemed to avoid casualties almost religiously. Hendricks thought back to the physician's words. That child barely cried, just watched everything with these dark eyes, like it was already learning. Learning what? Maybe not just tactics and shooting. Maybe ethics, philosophy. The ghost's final lesson might not have been how to fight. It might have been why to fight. Hendricks picked up her phone and called Peterson, the intelligence analyst. I need everything you can find on the ghost's final months. Travel patterns, financial transactions, any communications we intercepted. Colonel, that data is... I know it's classified. I have clearance. Send it to my secure terminal. Yes, ma'am. 30 minutes later, Hendricks was reading through fragmentary reports. The ghost's last confirmed purchase. Not weapons. Books. Educational materials. Medical supplies. The last confirmed sighting, not at a military installation, at a library in a small mountain town. Hendricks pulled up the library's records publicly accessible. The ghost had checked out books on ethics, philosophy, conflict resolution, teaching materials. She was preparing someone, not just to fight, but to understand when not to fight. Hendricks opened her encrypted email and composed a message to General Marsh. Sir, additional analysis suggests the ghost's successor operates under strict ethical constraints. Pattern indicates training focused on minimal harm and maximum strategic effect. Recommend continued monitoring without interference. This asset appears to be self-regulating. She sent it and closed the files. Some weapons, she reflected, were better left unused until absolutely necessary. And some legacies were better left to grow in the dark. The enemy commander, the one who'd been blinded, sat in a medical tent 3 kilometers from the valley. His face was bandaged, his eyes burned with chemical damage. The medic said he might regain partial vision in 6 weeks, if he was lucky. Victor listened to his subordinate's report with growing dread. She disappeared before the American helicopters arrived. No one saw her leave. No tracks. No thermal signature after 0515. How is that possible? We don't know, sir. It's like she became invisible. Victor touched his bandaged face. The memory was still fresh. That moment of recognition. The terrible understanding that he was facing something beyond normal combat. What about casualties, he asked. Among our forces, 3 dead from the mortar detonation, 7 wounded, including yourself. The flanking team leader will walk again, but his leg requires surgery. 10 casualties total, from an engagement where they'd outnumbered the enemy 8-1. And not a single American soldier had been scratched. The men are talking, his subordinate continued quietly. They say the ghost has returned. That's superstition. Is it? You saw her stance. You said yourself it matched the surveillance footage. Victor couldn't deny it. That posture, that rifle position, it was identical to the ghost's documented profile. If not the ghost, his subordinate pressed. Then who? Someone the ghost trained before dying. A daughter, maybe. Or a protege. Does it matter? The effect is the same. Our forces are terrified. Victor heard shouting outside the tent. He stood carefully, his balance still affected by the chemical burns. Outside, his men were gathered around a radio. Someone had intercepted American military communications. Confirmed, the ghost is active again in Sector 7. All units be advised. Victor grabbed the radio. That's enemy disinformation. The ghost is dead. His men looked at him with expressions mixing pity and disbelief. One soldier spoke. Sir, with respect. You're alive because she chose to let you live. That's what the ghost did. They didn't kill when wounding was sufficient. Another soldier nodded. My cousin fought against the ghost 3 years ago. He said the same thing. They could have killed him, but they took out his radio instead. Removed him from the fight without removing him from life. Victor wanted to argue, but his burned face was evidence of that exact philosophy. She's following the ghost's rules, he said quietly, which means, his subordinate concluded, she'll keep following them. Economy of force, surgical strikes, minimal casualties. That doesn't make her less dangerous, it makes her more dangerous. Victor sat down heavily. Because we can't fight someone who doesn't want to fight, we can only react to someone who controls when and how the engagement happens. That's not a battle, that's a game where she makes all the rules. One of his soldiers, a veteran of 10 years, spoke up. Sir, what if we stop trying to fight? Victor looked at him. You're suggesting we surrender? I'm suggesting we avoid sectors where she operates. We have other territories, other objectives. That's retreat. No, sir. That's recognizing when the cost exceeds the benefit. The soldier gestured at the wounded men. We lost 10 people for 0 gain. The American unit escaped. We wasted ammunition and morale. If she appears again, we could lose more. Victor wanted to disagree, but tactics required honesty. They'd been outplayed, not outfought. They'd barely fought at all, simply outthought. What about command? Someone asked. What will they say if we abandon the sector? Victor picked up his radio, switching to the command frequency. This is Victor Sokolov. I'm filing a tactical assessment. Recommend immediate withdrawal from sectors 6 through 9. Enemy has deployed a specialized counter-sniper asset. Engagement is not advised. Negative, command responded. You will hold current positions. Command, you don't understand. This isn't a normal sniper. This is... We've read the reports, Commander. Hold your positions. We're sending reinforcements. Victor closed his eyes. Reinforcements won't help. She'll identify and eliminate force multipliers. More people just gives her more targets. Your orders stand. The radio clicked off. His subordinate looked grim. They don't believe us. They will, Victor said quietly. After she does to the reinforcements what she did to us. 3 days later, the reinforcements arrived. 40 fresh soldiers, eager and confident. Victor briefed them personally. You are facing an opponent who doesn't fight like normal forces. They won't assault your position. They won't engage in firefights. They'll wait until you're committed, then disrupt your command structure. The reinforcement commander, a man named Alexei, laughed. You're afraid of one sniper? I'm cautious about one very specific sniper. We've dealt with American snipers before. Not like this one. Alexei waved him off. We'll secure the sector within 48 hours. Victor didn't argue. Some lessons had to be learned personally. 24 hours later, Alexei's force retreated. They'd advanced into the valley sector, established positions, begun coordinating patrols. The unknown sniper had disabled their communications truck with one shot through the engine block, then eliminated their forward observer. Then triggered 3 strategic rock slides that blocked their supply routes. No one had been killed. But the force was combat ineffective. Alexei returned to Victor's position, his confidence gone. How do we fight this? We don't, Victor said. We leave. Command won't allow. Command isn't here. We are. And I'm not sending more men to be humiliated. Over the next week, enemy forces quietly withdrew from sectors 6 through 9. Not from direct combat losses, total casualties remained under 20, but from psychological defeat. The understanding that any advance would be methodically dismantled by an opponent they couldn't see and couldn't counter. Victor filed his final report. Enemy has deployed a strategic psychological asset. Designation unknown. Capabilities match or exceed the Ghost. Recommendation: avoid engagement. Secure alternate territories. Command accepted the recommendation. The sectors were abandoned. And in the mountain camps, the story spread. The Ghost had returned. Or the Ghost had never left. Or the Ghost had become something worse. Something that multiplied. The stories varied. But the effect was consistent. Fear. And fear, Victor knew, was the most effective weapon of all. 5 years later, a different mountain range, a different conflict. Lieutenant Sarah Chen crouched behind cover, watching enemy positions through her scope. She was 24, 3 years into her military career, and this was her first deployment to a hot zone. Her spotter, Corporal Davis, pointed at movement on the northern ridge. Unknown contact, single individual. Chen swung her rifle toward the ridge. The figure moved with practiced efficiency, no wasted motion, no unnecessary exposure. Civilian? Davis asked. Armed, Chen observed. Rifle, custom build. They watched as the unknown individual settled into a firing position overlooking the valley. Should we report? Davis asked. Chen considered. They were here to observe enemy movements, not engage unknown friendlies. But procedures required reporting all contacts. Before she could decide, her radio crackled. All units, be advised. You may encounter an independent operator in your sector. Call sign unknown. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Observe only. Chen keyed her radio. Command, this is Overwatch 3. Can you provide description of this operator? Negative. Description varies. Pattern is consistent. Expert marksman, minimal engagement, operates alone. Davis looked confused. They don't know what this person looks like? Or, they're not saying, Chen replied. For 2 hours, they watched the unknown operator. The figure never moved, never fidgeted. Perfect discipline. Then enemy forces began moving through the valley below. The unknown operator tracked them through the scope, then made a subtle gesture with one hand. Chen recognized it. Measuring wind. They're preparing to shoot, she whispered. At this range? That's got to be 1,400 meters. The operator fired once. Through her scope, Chen watched the bullet's impact. An enemy communications array, destroyed. The enemy forces scattered, seeking cover. The operator didn't fire again. Just maintained overwatch. One shot, Davis breathed. Infrastructure target, classic counter-communications. That's Ghost doctrine, Chen said. What? I read the classified briefs. Before I deployed, there was an operator years ago who specialized in surgical disruption. They called them the Ghost. I heard those stories. But the Ghost is dead. That was, what, 8 years ago? Chen watched the unknown operator. Maybe the ghost trained someone. Over the next week, Chen's unit observed 3 more engagements. Each time, the unknown operator appeared. Each time, 1 or 2 shots. Always infrastructure, never unnecessary casualties. And each time, enemy forces withdrew in confusion. On the 7th day, Chen's unit was ambushed. They'd been moving through a canyon when enemy fire erupted from concealed positions. 2 soldiers wounded in the first volley. Chen returned fire, trying to locate targets. Then she heard it. A single rifle shot from high ground. The enemy heavy weapons position went silent. Another shot. The enemy commander dropped, clutching his shoulder. The ambush collapsed. Chen looked up at the ridgeline. A figure stood there briefly, too distant to identify, then disappeared. That evening, Chen found something at the location where her unit had taken cover. A brass casing. 338 Lapua Magnum. Beside it, scratched into stone. Continue the work. She picked up the casing, turning it in her fingers. Davis came up beside her. What is it? A message, Chen said. Or a reminder. Of what? She thought about the operator's discipline. The restraint. The surgical precision. That war isn't about killing, Chen said slowly. It's about solving problems. And sometimes the best solution doesn't require maximum violence, just maximum effect. Davis read the scratched words. Continue the work. Whose work? The ghosts. Whoever they were, whoever they trained. The work continues. Chen kept the brass casing. Years later, when she'd advanced to captain and was training new snipers, she'd show them that casing. This, she'd tell them, represents a philosophy. Economy of force, minimal engagement, maximum strategic effect. Some people call it the ghost doctrine. I call it fighting smart instead of fighting hard. And somewhere in the mountains, in a different conflict zone, a young woman taught a teenager to measure wind with their hand. The teenager was small, quick, observant. They learned without speaking, absorbed lessons through demonstration. The woman rarely spoke. When she did, her words were precise. One bullet must end the war, not start it. The teenager nodded, understanding. They'd been training for 3 years now. The woman was preparing to leave soon, not because she wanted to, but because her presence was becoming too noticeable. Pattern recognition was a double-edged sword. Too many solved problems in one region, and people started asking questions. Better to move, to vanish, to become myth. But first, the final lesson. The woman led the teenager to a ridgeline overlooking a valley. Below, a military convoy moved through disputed territory. Observe, the woman said. The teenager watched through the scope, identified the command vehicle, the communications truck, the security perimeter. If you had to stop this convoy, the woman asked, how would you do it? The teenager thought. Disable the lead vehicle, block the road, force them to stop. And then? They call for support. Reinforcements arrive. The situation escalates. The teenager looked again, studied the pattern. I wouldn't stop them, they concluded. I'd let them pass. They're not threatening anyone right now. Stopping them creates a problem that doesn't exist yet. The woman smiled. Exactly. The best fight is the one you don't start. She handed the rifle to the teenager. Your weapon now, your responsibility. The teenager accepted it with reverence. Remember, the woman said, you're not a soldier. You're not following orders. You're solving problems that no one else can solve, or preventing problems that no one else can see. Like you did. Like my mother did. And her teacher before her. The woman paused. Legacy isn't genetic, it's philosophical. Anyone can learn this, but few choose to. Because it requires restraint. And restraint is harder than action. The teenager nodded, understanding. The woman stood. I'm leaving tomorrow. You won't see me again. Where will you go? Somewhere I'm needed. Somewhere problems are developing. She looked at the teenager. You'll do the same. Trust your judgment. Act when necessary. Disappear when prudent. How will I know when I'm needed? You'll see the patterns. The same patterns my mother taught me to see. Injustice. Imbalance. The small problems that become big wars if no one intervenes. The teenager absorbed this. One more thing, the woman said. Never become famous. Fame makes you a target. Mystery makes you a legend. Legends are more useful than heroes. She walked away down the mountain. The teenager watched her go, then turned back to the valley. Through the scope, they practiced, measuring wind, calculating distance, finding the space between heartbeats. The rifle felt right, an extension of purpose. Below, the world continued its conflicts and crises. And on the mountains, in the silence, the work continued. Ghosts teaching ghosts. Legends multiplying in the dark. Because the best weapon wasn't a bullet, it was an idea that refused to die.